So we continue our configuration down here in the startup file under our presentation layer. Let's just hide the Explorer for now. Inside the settings right here that I put in here, we're going to do services and then we can actually add a DB context. Now, what is a DB context? Well, a DB context is a way that we communicate with our database. So this is going to be our communication to the database. Now, I want you guys to understand that if we go into our actual main DB context that we built in earlier lessons right here, again, notice there's no database specific information right here. It's not like it says MS SQL or it says SQLite or MySQL. There's no information about what we actually connect to. It can be any type of database that is supported actually by a DB context. So right now, this is a generic DB context that communicate with any form of database. Now we have to on runtime decide what database to use. So that's what we're going to do. So let's go back to the startup file right here. By adding DB context, we can start by defining what DB context do we want to use in our system. Now this is going to be our main DB context again, the one that we built ourselves. So this is just again a configuration file that we can now use in our system if we want to do certain things against the database, either when it starts up or we know what tables are in there. So this is kind of a schema for the database as a file right here. We're going to use that, of course. And this is our setup, so that's why I'm kind of pointing at that right now. When we have this, we need to do one more thing. We need to explain to the system now specifically what database do you want to use. And specifically, you can go in and say options right here to start building what should be actually configured for your database right here. And then we could do curly brackets like this. And here we can now define what we want to use as a database. So what do we want to use? In my case, I want to use SQLite. But notice it's not there. There's no SQLite. There's in memory database, there is something with the Logger factory. We'll get back to that later. Internal server. There's no SQLite here. So where's the SQLite? We need to actually go now and get that using Nuget packages. So let's go and find SQLite. So I'll go into my project right here, the Web API project. I'll right click, I'll say manage Nuget packages. And here I can search for Entity Framework SQLite right here. Let me actually give you guys a bit more space. There we go. So I just searched for this and now I found it. But there's a small but. Because since I started the series, version 6 just came out. That means that I'm on version 5 right here, but now version 6 showed up. So I have two choices now. And this lesson, I'm going to downgrade the SQLite to version 5, even though version 6 is available. But you have to kind of beware of this, right? So even though version 6 is available, my framework right now is actually using version 5. So that means I'm going to find the version instead of 6.0. I'm going to pick the latest version of 5 right here in order to install this. If you try 6.0, you'll get this. Just to show you, if I try to install version 6.0, it says you're not compatible with 6.0 because you're using .NET version 5 in your Web API project. We'll go and change that later just to kind of upgrade and show you guys how you can update versions. But for now, that means I need to kind of downgrade or at least use the version 5 of my SQLite right here in my system. I mentioned this because you will probably get kind of the same experience since you might watch the video in a year or two and you'll get the same issues because of course they keep upgrading the versions. So right now again I have 5.12 in my selection right here. I've selected the SQLite framework and then I can do an add right here to explain how I want to install that to my Web API project right here. Now with the SQLite framework in here, let's just hide this again, I now can actually go and use SQLite. So again, it means that if you don't have that package in there, you cannot see this use SQLite. It's something that's being added to the code when you add the package. So let's try and do use SQLite. And how do we actually do it? Well, it's very, very simple, luckily. We just have to put a connection string in here. And it's not any complex connection string. It pretty much just explains what database do you want to use and what do you want to name your database. And then out of the box, it's just going to place a file right here in our code, all the way down here near to the startup file. It's just going to place a file there. It's not going to be any external database. It's just going to be a local file. In order to do this, all we have to do is kind of just say data source equals and then give it some kind of name. I'll just call mine main, and then you have to put in db.db to kind of give it that file name in the end right there. So this is how easy it is to set up SQLite. And right now, I've set it up for my entire system. I might later on add a small dev flag right here to say I don't want to use SQLite on development, or I only want to use SQLite on development. I don't want to use it on production maybe. So we can change that if we want to throughout the lifetime of the application. And that's again, we have the generic DB context that can be used for any database. And now we are kind of specifying for the development mode right now, we are going to use the data source and we're going to actually use a main DB that's locally available. So that's it for this lesson. Let's actually try and run our system now just to see if it can run. And then next lesson, what we can do is actually we can try and dive more into actually how to put some data into the database. And there we go. It just started up. It seems it starts on something called Swagger. We can talk more about that next lesson, but it's just a kind of an overview about your entire API. And right now we only have one endpoint right here, and the endpoint is get products. Let me just zoom a little bit. There we go. And now I can execute by pressing right here. I press try it out, and then I press execute, and then I can try and see if I can even call this, and I'm getting no such table products. So it fails because we have not instantiated our database yet, and that's what we're going to do next lesson. So let's end it right here. Now you know a little bit about how we can add DBContext and use certain SQLite right here instead of just any database. We're going to now focus on SQLite in this system right here. See you next time. Bye.